All right, story time. Who wants to go first? Ebony.
About to stand up there.
You don't have to.
It's a bad poem. I am Ebony's pink shirt. She chose to wear me this morning because I don't need ironing. She thinks that's too much work. I even matched with the earphones of her iPod. I got many glances, smiles, and compliments before 5. I'm bright and fabulous, but tonight at bedtime, I'll be tossed aside. That's all right. It's even buried in a hamper. I still shine.
Who next?
Okay. Mine is brilliant. Yes. I watched her stumbling around in the morning. I was so relieved to hear the end of her snoring, and that is the end of the rhyme. And it wasn't even a slant rhyme. She grabbed me off the cube and slapped me on like a slap bracelet and struggled till the click clock was in place. Ignored me for hours. I timed it right down to the second, staring at the glow that lit up her face. Antsy, she shuffled me around and around while her comrades dibbled and dabbled for argument's sake. Staff meetings, she sighed with a voice of itching sickness as she swaggered up the stairs. She glanced at me many times amidst the games in juvie, splashed water on me when she got home and washed the dishes, and finally my story is told. I'm still here tick-tocking while Bernard gets a talking.
Nobody wears a watch that much.
I know, it's really because of juvie actually that I wear it.
Yeah.
Oh, Richard.
All right. The mouse that I am is very quick to respond. I enjoy being fast on my pad right from the start today. Swift motions, taps and bumps into the best creativity I enjoyed in the past few days. Oh, what a feeling to be wanted again. Working, creating, loving, living to my utmost. Thank you, my friend.
That's awesome.
Who else? All right, I'll do mine. Mine is short and see if you can guess. It's hot in here. Up, down, up, down, up, down. What's on that screen? Wait, I can't see. Wait, I can't see. I can't see. Okay, now we're getting into this car. Still up, down, but we're moving forward too. Okay. I'm so used to traveling on shoes. This is so much better. Except it's so hot. Hamburgers, what are y'all doing here? Don't drown me. No!
Tongue, glasses.
Close.
Tongue, glasses, mouth, teeth.
Something to do with the mouth.
Mouth. Lips.
It's a tongue.
Tongue. I said tongue at the beginning. Tongue. The fan.
I just gave you a clue.
Gum.
Gum! Oh, that is awesome! That's so cool! Well, yeah. Oh, I get it now, because on the side.
Can't believe you ate a hamburger with gum in your mouth.
I didn't.
It's so cruel and unusual.
It's a story.
It's a story.
Your story.
Oh, it's my turn?
Yes, your turn.
Okay. Dark. Vision. Vice, clenched, feeling of air into sound, parentheses, an endless repetition of evanescent, effluent wind/visions into vision, or dark, vision, vice, clenched, and comrades broken with sound and fury of dark, vision, vice, Now he's becoming smaller in the horizon of vision, air, and sounds. I'm free.
I feel like they're getting even more puzzly as we...
Your eyeballs.
Nope.
Wait, I almost want to ask you to read it again.
I'll read it again. Okay. It looks like this. And it even has a picture at the bottom. Alright. Dark. Vision. Vice. Cleansed. Feeling of air into sound.
parentheses, an endless repetition of evanescent effluent winds/visions into dark vision. And comrades broke him as sound and fury up dark vision. Now he is becoming smaller in the horizon of vision, air, and sounds. I'm free.
Phone.
Don't have a cell phone.
An atom.
A what?
Atom. A-T-O-M.
Uncle, I don't know.
Yay!
What is it?
It's not too big. So it's dark,
That's
and then when you pull it
brilliant.
out, it's vision, and it's clenched. Feeling of air into sound, where your words are going over it. An endless repetition of evanescent effluent winds, visions, so like where it's talking and it's saying things and it's moving around, into dash. So you're putting it in dark again, like you take it out, put it in dark, you pull it out again. Vision, and it's like it has like a bunch of periods where it repeats the same sequence at the beginning.
Wow.
And comrades broke, but you snap at him as sound and fury, because the stuff you throw it away. Then dash, another one, dark, vision. And then when you throw it away, and then it's like there, and you leave it on the ground and you're walking away, now he is becoming smaller in the horizon of vision, because there's no more dark, because now I can just see, so it's not being put in the pocket anymore. Air, now it's just in the air, so it's not air into sound, because it's not going through words, and sound divided by the comma, and it's free.
Oh my gosh.
And then there's pictures at the bottom.
Wow. Oh my god.
All right, final two.
I'll go.
Yay.
9:15 is the usual time she scurries in, and she looks at me with a twisted disgust that's mixed with passion. To her, I'm a linear device that can mechanically suck up variable volumes of Regent, but I know she loves me every time. Sometimes it hurts when she disposes my tips. Her thumb makes me release it too hard, but that's okay though. Romance isn't meant to be 100% pleasurable anyways.
So,
No.
Wow.
Toothbrush.
No.
no padding.
I know where you work, so I kind of got it.
You guessed it already.
Well, I don't know exactly. With some type of scientific
Yeah.
It has something to do with science, yeah.
kind of sucking up with the tip. My linear.
You're really close.
Is it a needle?
No.
Some type of syringe.
Yeah, close.
Oh, a dropper thing?
Close. Turkey baster.
Yeah, pretty much.
I don't even know like what
Some
you would
tool
use.
in science. Scientific thing.
What is the official name?
Mechanical pipette.
Is it? Wait, is that just the clear pipe?
Yeah,
Put
just
your thumb-
pipette.
You put your thumb on it and it.
Yeah, basically. Thank you.
Warning now, I am not a good story writer. Okay. Today she woke up and left me on the floor to go for a run. When she got back, she spent a good 2 hours writing an outline for a Bible study on Revelation. After that, she picked me up off the floor and headed to the living room. She spent time with her family. But she forgot she had to get ready for a friend to pick her up to take her to school. He came early and she was nowhere ready to leave yet. She rushed to get ready. She was rushing so much she almost forgot me on the table. The car ride to the school was very, very hot, but as soon as we got into the building, we both pulled on. I had to finish, but that's okay.
Laptop.
That's my phone. Yeah.
Well, thank you all. It was very fun. We should do that all the time.
I know. That was
Good
good.
stuff.
That was on my box.
So that's in honor of. I don't know if you guys got to read 2 chapters. We doubled up from last week, design and story.
Because you're a slave driver.
Yes. So, did anybody have anything out of the story chapter from A Whole New Mind? They jumped out at them. If not, I'll just kind of go through stuff that I picked up.
A really sweet quote where it says there's been civilizations without the wheel, but there's never been a civilization without a story.
Yeah.
That was kind of sweet. I can't remember who said that, but it was in there somewhere.
Yeah. Was it Joseph Campbell?
Absolutely.
Well, he was talking about the Joseph Campbell story. It might have been him. Let's see. On page 100, he was saying, your stories amuse and they they divert, whereas facts reveal and are straightforward. So I think that kind of goes back to the stuff we've been talking about with mystery and surprise and curiosity. And kind of, how I always say about the comedian, the reason we listen to the comedian is because he can say inappropriate things and we'll take it because it's funny. I think that's how stories are. What he's saying is like, you can bring the most mundane material and put it in a story and people want to listen. Like whenever somebody's talking or giving a speech, they're just like blah, 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 go on, college speeches, go on and conquer the world. Like you're just nodding off, but then somebody says something like, one time when I was 5, all of a sudden you perk up. Mm-hmm. And there's something so interesting about storytelling and the human person that it's coming from. So we love stories for some reason. When you were a little kid, you read stories, so why would you stop now just because you've grown up? We all need stories. I like what he said, I can't remember which page, but he just says, stories help us put things in context. And I think about movies and films and the characters. The characters aren't just a part of nothingness. It's not just random events happening. There's a plot line, there's a beginning, a middle, and end. Pieces connect. So I guess thinking about that, what we've been talking about, the left brain and the right brain, it's one thing just to have factual information, but if you can weave it together in such a way that people are attentive, that's going to make it that much easier for you to persuade people of something. And I think about that in the business world. This guy who I work with sometimes, he's always telling about when he sends out, he gets a group of people who are his consistent clients, and he says, I always send out a newsletter, I always update them with, oh yeah, me and my wife, and just a picture, we went kayaking this summer, me and the kids, and you think, well, who cares about that? And he's like, when people feel like they're connected to you, they have no problem buying stuff from you because they feel like they know you. And I think it kind of goes like what Evan was saying about when you were asking about, Evan was asking about criticism, and he was saying, it's about relationship. That person now has the right to sort of criticize you. I think it's a similar thing. It's like once you're in relationship with people, these sort of walls and these allowances of things happen. And Pink talks about, that's what made me think of this guy who I know. He said, he would just always get these postcards in the mail about, buy a home's $5,000, and it would just list off facts. But he got one that was this story, and he said he couldn't put it down. So I think that gets to the power of story.
Yeah, then he had a story about the wine. He was trying to choose the wine. He had 5 choices of wine.
Yeah.
He didn't know what to choose, the quality of wine, but then he saw a label sharing the story behind the wine. He picked the story.
Yeah, like 2 brothers started a wine company or something after their mom died or something.
The money goes towards,
So I think that ties in a lot with what we were talking about, the emotional and intuitive side. That part of us likes the relationship and the connection have. So when you tell stories, you get people in that hook. It's not enough just to give them, well, these are the amenities. People want to hear about that family, whatever, I can't think of a good word for it, but that, lack of a better term, that family connection. I thought it was interesting on 106, he talked about this company called Story Quest, where they would actually compile the stories, the history of the company. And then, I don't know I can't remember if this was the same thing, but like when people are doing tech support, rather than just saying, the guy's computer broke, blah, 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 like they kept an overall story of the people in the database, so as other people would come back and have to say, what was that guy's problem? It was much more in context, and it gave them a better picture of how to solve the problem rather than just being like, his computer broke. Similar thing with page 109, he's talking about, the patient's, getting the patient's story versus just the facts and the straight raw data about what's wrong with them. Because like you said, you come into a hospital, what's the first thing you do? You tell how you were hurt. You don't just say, my leg is broken. You're like, I was coming down the steps, I tripped over. Like story, like you're saying, put things in context, the details. This is going to change how the doctor treats you. There's the obvious one. We're talking about the image of the Creator. Obviously, Jesus talked in parables. He didn't just ramble on. Like he always had an interesting story to convey the point he was going for. And there's something, I don't know, I haven't really figured out what it is, but there's something just in the power of story, which I've been trying to think about for the past few months. Like, why is it we're so fascinated by stories and characters and people? So I can't really get it out now, but there's just something, just like ponder that. Why do we love story? And I also think it's very interesting in think about Revelation, where it says, we overcome by the blood and the power of our testimony. I think it's just interesting that the thing we overcome with is a story. So that's the story chapter. But yeah, it was just, I know, listen to your guys' stories. It's just something so fascinating about going through life, regular, going to work, going to school, doing whatever you do, and then to all of a sudden when I say, oh yeah, write it from the perspective of an object. It's like you're in this whole new world and you're thinking, you're like, oh, what is he talking about? Oh yeah. I don't know, it just transforms things. Like to hear Ebony talking about her shirt, all of a sudden you become more aware of the things around you. Like, oh yeah, the hamper. Oh, my shirt. What if my shirt was looking at my room? It would be noticing all these things. And, what was yours about again? So watch. I don't know, it just causes us to think about things in different ways. And he's going to get into the later chapters talking about metaphors and how, cross-integrating things, how if you're in the arts, don't consider, doctors and scientists just this separate thing. Like everything has a connection. So I think it's just the ability to make those crossovers is probably one thing that story does.
Do you think it's because story is the most realistic phenomenon? Because every human, what we live is stories. When we hear someone going off on, say, a philosophical rant explaining some sort of thing, that's not realistic because you never experience those things within the context of like words on a chalkboard. The way you experience them is the story you're living the story that you're living your own life. Like you hear a lot of people who talk about who ended up doing great things. They thought of themselves as a character in a story. Because technically, if you think about that, what we actually all are. It's just that we can't go buy our story at Barnes & Noble and cheat by peeking at the end, or there's no way to go back to the beginning. And there's no way to catch something if you miss it the first time. You can't go back. Like in a story, if you miss the use of the color red as the driving motif of this idea, it's not like you can go back and reread. So I think you can remember them, right? But like if you, for example, miss, I don't know, the crack in the floor, and there you can't go back and see the crack in the floor. There's almost this degree where when we hear stories, it makes us more aware of our own life. It gives us eyes in many respects, like you were just saying, with world, like views. When you think of things in the terms of stories, it gives us eyes, and since each one of us lives a life with eyes, I think we resonate with that way more than giving some sort of lecture that isn't in story format, because that's actually what's unrealistic. What's realistic is story format.
We're persons, and so we like to be drawn into the personal as opposed to facts are very abstract for us. Everybody views fact through their own lens, through their own story anyway. So, you can have, we're looking at, that wall over there, and it's white, and it's sort of brick behind there. But we all may see that from the perspective of our own person. And so I think that we are drawn to the personal because we are persons, and we're drawn to that which sort of we are and draws us in. I think it sort of makes us a part of something.
Yeah, that's something to ponder. Like I said, I'm kind of intrigued by the idea of story, and I don't know if there is any figuring it out, but there's just something fascinating about it there that I'm on a kind of mission to figure out. So design, the other chapter we didn't do last week was design. Anybody have anything from there? First thing I picked up on while you guys were looking on page 70 was this idea of, he quoted somebody saying, we want things that have utility and significance. And it's interesting reading that, especially coming from the architecture school, where, that you've probably heard that phrase many years, form follows function. It doesn't look good unless it works. Like, we worry about what it does, and then we worry about how it looks. And he's like, no, we're moving towards the opposite, where people care a whole lot about how things look and the meaning and the feeling, the emotional impact that it has on them versus just how does it, functionally behave. And I remember we studied this section in architecture school. It's like after the Enlightenment period, there's this period where everything went to this rationality. It's like, you don't like a column because it's beautiful. You like it because the proportions of the mathematics of the column satisfy your mind. It was all very linear thinking. And I remember thinking that was very strange when we went through that section. I mean, I think, like I said, when we're talking about order and beauty, the two are interdependent. There's no just this or just that. Like, it's beautiful because it's proportional, but nobody's sitting there looking at the proportions and like, oh, X plus B. Well, some people do like that stuff, and that's fine for them. But most of us enjoy just the sheer quality of the aesthetic. And the thing that's driving that aesthetic is the proportion. So the two are interweaved. I mean, when you think about architecture and design, the thing that people remember most, like we're talking about stories and memories, is the sort of feel of a place when they come into it. It's not so much about, oh wow, I like how the bathroom is right next to the living room. It was those things are great if they work and you want them to be as functional as possible, but people don't remember the strict facts about a building. They remember like, oh wow, it was really beautiful, and the light and the color, and the way that the sun hit the light the way the sun hit the windows and the stained glass. I had I think I told you guys, I had this when I went to Ohio, like last month. This lady I stayed with, she was saying their church had got to a point where they had these stained glass windows that were really old, and half of the church was very practical. It was like, yeah, let's just get rid of it and we'll just put up regular windows. And this other half was like, no, are you kidding? Like, this is, like, we can't just go without this. Like, we need this. So it's just wrestling back and forth about keeping this stained glass thing that could have just been discarded, and the people who wanted to save money would have gotten their way. I mean, she was saying she's glad that there's two kinds of people. For one half to say like, yeah, we got to have structural and functional things that work, but the other half of the people who look at things like, well, what if this wasn't, like she said, people started to realize that what if this beautiful color wasn't here? We would miss it, but we're so used to seeing it that we don't miss it. We've probably talked about this book, but The Design of Everyday Things. The guy, he's also written a book called Emotional Design, and the idea of things work better when they look better. But just thinking about design as an everyday part of life. I think people get so used to just stuff being around. Like I said, when I went to architecture school, kind of making that whole, we were talking about story and how it makes us realize things. I remember being in architecture school and they just made us realize stuff by taking notice of a detail. And now when I look around, I'm like, oh yeah, somebody had to make this. This didn't just come into being by itself. And it also makes me hate bad design. Now when I'm using something that doesn't work, I'm like, whoever designed, like he said in his portfolio, he's like, when you find something, you need to write the person and be like, look, this is how this should work, because this is garbage right now. But, he's just talking about how design is going to drive life. It's going to be a part of everyday life. I like what he said about the toaster. We have toasters that sit on our counters for most of the minutes of the day. Maybe 2 minutes of the whole day it's used. So why do we care how they look? They're not just functional. We want them to look cool too. I mean, they got me thinking about... Yeah. And they got me thinking about creation. It's like, stuff doesn't just work. It looks good. Apples, they don't just feed your body. They taste good. There's dual components to all of this. So we should reflect that in the things that we make and the education that we teach. Things shouldn't just be functional. They should be enjoyable, pleasurable as well. And then the last thing from this chapter that I'll bring out, we talked about this before, but I really like this hospital. The fact that hospitals being designed well help people recover faster. And it made me think of an article we read in architecture. It's called "We're All Outdoor Animals." And they said they did a study and said people who could look out their window while they worked actually were more productive. Just this connection to nature. So that's something I've been thinking about lately. It's just, how we've kind of detached ourselves from the original source, the natural environment that we're in, and how that affects creativity, how that affects physical well-being, emotional well-being, and like how do we create places and buildings that help to stir up that kind of emotional well-being and physical well-being rather than make them purely functional. And I think since we can't see those things, it's easier just to throw them to the wayside. Like, we can't see emotions, so it doesn't matter if we're emotionally affected by this building. Does it work? That's what I know when I walk through the hallway, it's too narrow. Like, we notice that stuff immediately, but the stuff we don't see, it takes us longer to notice, so we don't pay attention to it. But obviously, we do pay attention to it because, you can tell when you're like, I can't write in this place. It's too dingy. It's too dark. We've all sure been in a creative mode when we just couldn't work because the place where we were was just non-inspiring. All right, so that's Dan Pink. So now we go on to the charts.
Hey, Renata, this chapter on design, the democracy of design, which I thought was very interesting, how we're more aware of design on just typography. In Times New Roman, no one heard of that 10 years ago, but everybody, they had this test, Times New Roman and Arial, right, font, where most people didn't know what it was. Now we know what it was, and so we're more acutely aware in general public of design and typography because on computer. It's just interesting. Our level has actually been better, I think, in that sense.
And I thought it was interesting too as you bring that, made me think about, he had this thing in the chapter about the whole Bush and Gore, the ballot, the whole thing in Florida, and he's like, that's a product of bad design.
Yeah.
People couldn't vote right because the card wasn't designed well enough to be like, this name, this selection. So he's like, design can affect a nation.
Yes.
Yeah, that was... Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, some of you guys don't have the first one, but I have this little board that if throughout the week or whatever, any point, you find something that like inspires you, you want to pin it up here. Thought we'd have a collage of ideas, stories, business cards, whatever. All right, so last week we talked a lot about education, American education system, and how it shapes our brains. And since that's the realm where the mind shaping happens, it's probably very important that we know what's going in our mind and how it's affecting us. And I think this is the book I used in the first class, but I thought it was interesting. The subtitle of this Abolition of Man is How Education Develops Man's Sense of Morality. And I don't think we ever think about education as developing a moral sense, but those are really the education, church, and arts. I can't think of any other places, but those are all mind, idea spheres. Nowhere else do we spend. Where else? I mean, family, yeah. But like, it's not as deliberate. Like, when you go to school, your mind is the thing that people are trying to shape. Your parents teach you stuff.
It's more
I think they're deliberate.
Yeah.
in your family as opposed to you going to.
Anyway,
I think more
institutions.
I think more directed. I think education is definitely more directed, though. But yeah, the parents, too. We'll talk with some of that. So, I just kind of brought up some of the old charts because, earlier we were talking about whatever information gets in your brain causes you to have an emotion, and then that emotion that you feel causes you to have a thought, so you can get into this cycle. So, if people are putting stuff in your brain at school, it does affect your morality because it also affects your emotions. It may not also be what they put in your brain, it may be a lack of what they put in your brain. So if they're not putting in this idea that you're a creative person and you have the ability to see potential and possibilities, like here, we're being taught in school right now to see narrow tunnel vision and not to look outside of the box. If you're not being taught that, when you go out into the world, that's the image and the shape of your brain is going to have of itself. You're going to only see yourself as this mechanistic, robotic thing who can only make money. So we're still going to talk a little bit about education tonight. So we've been using the yin-yang symbol for lots of stuff. And like I said, the yin-yang, I think, is the perfect symbol because it speaks to interdependent parts that can live on their own, in isolation, but when they do, they usually fall apart. Because if you're on this other chart that I have from the first class, flexibility and stability. If you have stability, that's great. But too much stability can be boring and weigh you down. You can have flexibility, that's great. But too much flexibility can be scary and terrifying. So if you don't have the two to merge with each other, you're going to have either a bored life or a scared life. So, using this yin-yang thing, just playing off the idea of the mind, now we have a huge left yin brain and a tiny right yang brain. That's what the education system is trying to do to us currently. So, right here on this chart, I have this idea of the line versus the circles. And so, you can find this line and circle, I think, in a lot of spheres of life, but right now, strictly in education to start on the line side, I think the reason people like the line, the linear approach, is because it's going back to what I said in the very first ever class, the idea of mystery. People, to a certain degree, don't like mystery because it's just that. It's unknown. It's scary. So when you have a line, there's a clear starting point and stopping point. You know you're going to start at A. You know you're going to end at B. Ebony, I got some stuff for you, Ebony. Some charts inspired by you. Now, the idea with the circle is you can have an A, but your B can end here, or your B can end here, or your B can come up. That's the problem. People don't like the circle way of looking at things because there's no clear-cut path. It's like, where do I get on this thing? Like a merry-go-round. Where's the get-on point? There is no right point. You get on where you feel like. So I think people like this because it makes them feel safe. Like, I know what the outcome's going to be. I know where to get on. I know where to get off. Here, there's no certainty. Now, there's no right and wrong. It's just different. For the line, you can definitely be wrong. And I think it's kind of interesting that there's this phrase I have that says, we do the right things, but we do them in the wrong places. So I think it's interesting that people in this area, they kind of like the idea of being wrong because it speaks back to the limit. It's like, yeah, okay, we were wrong, but we know the limits because we know it couldn't be any other thing. But people generally don't like to be wrong, but they kind of like it in this area. In this area, you would think people would love that, just do whatever you want. There's no right or wrong. It feels good. It's like, no, I don't like that. I need some structure. I need some discipline. In other areas of life, people would love that. Yeah, there's no right or wrong. Just do whatever you feel like. Go out and do all the things that you make your heart content. They like it in that area, but in the area of, creativity and education, it's like, no. We need to shut that down. We need some clear delineation of right and wrong. So on this side, you have linear thinking, logic, reason. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with linear thinking, logic, or reason. It's only bad when it's isolated unto itself. And then here I put sense, as in sensory, as in 5 senses. So people like, sense in the meaning of the word like common sense or brain sense. But then you hear people who are very much into science, they figure out things by what you can touch. What's three-dimensional, what you can feel, what you can see. So there's the things that are intangible and unseen they're afraid of because they can't sense them with their five senses. It's not concrete. And I think that, ties into the artists, spiritual people. That's why people fear creativity in a lot of ways, because they can't see it. It's unknown. I can't, where's the one chart?
You put it in a box.
Say what?
You can't really put it in a box.
Yeah, you can't. That's something Daniel was saying. There's if you can't measure it, then it's not real. I was watching someone TED Talks, and this woman said, her professor said, if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. And she loved that, because she was one of those kind of people who's like, great, I like being inside this box. And so Daniel was going to talk about, the whole idea of even experiencing God. And you try to tell people, oh yeah, I know God. What are you talking about you know God? Because they can't measure it with some type of ruler. And he was saying, the whole point of having a relationship with God is that it's personal. So yes, by default, you could never experience what I experience because it's personal. And it's like, who has never had a personal experience? I've never had an experience that's separate from myself. So you're not going to be able to measure my subjective personal experience just by the sheer fact that it's personal. So yeah, people, they like the focused, because they can see that. It's like, yep, I can hone in on that, I got it. But all this other stuff, even though it's fun, you got imagination and desire and scope and adaptation and multi-sensory new uses, all this possibility and things out there that are fun and exciting. People get afraid of them just because they can't, like Evan said, put them in a box and see them. So, but I was thinking about this today. If you think about the idea of potential and possibility, by definition, you can't see possibility until you get there. It's invisible. Possibility is not seen until it's reached. That's why it's a possibility. It's not realized yet. So here on the circle side, I also put, how we use that term circular reasoning? I think that's kind of what people think of when they think of emotions, because you make a point and you say something, it's like, oh, that's circular reasoning. It's like, well, yeah, in a sense it is, because it's not based upon A and then B follows and then C follows. It's kind of does, the way your emotions work is kind of just based upon themselves. Why do you feel the way you feel? I don't know, I just do. Why are you happy? I mean, there may be a reason behind it, but you can never really make it as clear cut as linear thinking. This is this because of that. You feel a certain way just because that's the way the feeling is. Sometimes it's hard to explain emotions. So I think it's just interesting that it's called circular, versus linear kind of thinking. It's kind of a emotional thinking. So you got circular reasoning, you got intuition. Another derogatory word, nonsense. When people say, yeah, that's a bunch of nonsense. Yes, it is true. Emotion is nonsense. It doesn't think, but it has a very derogatory term, like you're not smart because you're using emotions. And it's not true. I was actually I was flipping through the TV this weekend in Miller Center, which is over off Ivy. They do all this political stuff, political lectures. They had a guy talking a lot about what Pink is saying in the book. He has this book called The Social Animal, and it was very interesting. A lot of things he was talking about, and one of them he was saying is, there's this shift coming now where people are realizing that reason and logic are actually centered in emotions. This whole idea again of the integrated mind. Like you don't make decisions sheerly based upon what you think. You also base them upon how you feel. Mostly, we base them, I think, in one sense, on how we feel. Like they're saying in the chapter about design, it's like you buy a toaster or an iPod because the way it makes you feel when you look at it. I mean, yeah, there's a logical part to it. It's like, is this going to hold all the songs that I want to hold? 10,000 songs? But beyond that, you're like, oh, I like the way that looks too. So I think it's just interesting that we have these derogatory words like nonsense or circular reasoning or subjective or you're just too emotional. Or I can't remember if it's in this chapter or the one I just read in this book, A Whole New Mind. But he's saying there's a new course at some college where people are actually learning to use emotions more, and they call it the touchy-feely class. It's like, yeah, anything dealing with feelings or touching is kind of considered like, nonsense, derogatory. So, Still, on this side, the right answer versus you are the answer. So you could equate the right answer with the linear thinking, you are the answer with the circular thinking. So people, like I said, people like this because it's predictable. You got the math equation, ax plus by equals c. We give you the numbers, you plug them in, you know what's going to happen. No need to worry. No fear. We control everything. So you got education times good grades plus occupation times lots of money equals success. Predictable. It's not your own thing, but you know the outcome. Over here, we simultaneously want this and fear this. Because when you ask people what they want to do with their life, they're so trained in this mentality that they can't really answer. They think you're fishing for an answer. I want to be a doctor. And you're like, well, what do you want to be? A lawyer? No, what do you want to be? A scientist. You know, it's like they can't think for themselves because they're thinking in the terms of what do people want from me? What is the teacher expecting back? And so we want the unpredictability because, in one sense, like I said, following the yin yang thing over here, you know, we like the knowing parts of us always want to chase the unknown. We like that, but then in the other sense, we don't like it because it is unpredictable. So we'll get to what can help make it so you want the unpredictability in its right context. So I like this phrase, you are the answer. Because that means you can't fail. There is no right answer. You are the answer. If somebody asks you what you're going to do with your life, you say, I'm going to do me. That's the phrase that's out now. I'm just going to do me. So, I don't know. I came up with that. I really like this. Like, you are the answer. There is no right answer. You are the answer. And I said, you know, that's like somebody coming up to you, Laura Jean, and be like, you're wrong. Like, how could you even say that to a person? You are incorrect. It's impossible. I mean, they can say it, but it's obviously not true. There is no universal basis of a answer or solution that corresponds to you. You are making it up. That's why it's question mark. So, looking at that, these two concepts from a purely grammatical viewpoint. So you have the idea of the period versus the question mark. And this goes back to one of these earlier charts where I said, you know, nowadays people are praised for their sheer observation. You look at an aluminum can on the sidewalk and declare, that is an aluminum can. And people's like, you're a genius. You made an observation. That's what you do in school. They teach you an answer and you write it down on a sheet of paper. You're a genius. You're able to copy and reflect stuff. No, what are you going to do beyond that? But then the people over here who actually think outside of the box, who look at an aluminum can and say, no, that's not an aluminum can, that's a sculpture. No, that's a cure for cancer. You're such a stupid person. It goes back to that mentality that the concrete thinking, scientists, people who can see things in the physical are the smarter ones, whereas the people who see the invisible are stupid. And I kind of related to the idea of when people tell you they see things that aren't there, what do we call them? We call them crazy. So that's what artists do. We see things that aren't there. So apparently we're crazy. So taking that idea back to the period and question mark, and when you make a statement, you end it with a period. Statement is finished. It's over. But when you ask a question, that means the question mark is now asking you, what are you going to do? How are you going to answer this question? So I think if you look at that in the context of life, your life can be a period or it can be a question mark. And so most people live it as a period. Somebody tells them, here, you do this. So they go to school, they go to college, they get a job, they retire, they die. There is no sense of what am I going to do? Somebody gave them a statement. This is what you do. Versus the question mark, you're always in your life at certain points saying, what will I do? The question mark, just like surely from a grammatical viewpoint, when you have a question mark at the end, you can't just leave it. It's waiting for you to do something. So I think it's interesting that, like I said, people like this because it's easy. There's a point A, there's a point B. I know I'm going to school, I know I'm going to be this, and then I'm going to die. Whereas this, you're making it up as you go along, and people don't like that. And we'll get to why that is in a minute. I'm tying this idea here that we're created for, eternal. We have this desire for eternity. We all have this desire for depth and longevity. And so I think part of the reason, while even though this is safe for people and it's laid out for them point A to B, they're really bored because we never get to the point where we want to stop doing things, because I think that eternity is built in us. We were supposed to last forever, but then the fall cut that short. We're still going to last forever, in the big picture, but right here, we still have this longing to do things that are eternal. So the question mark, I think, plays into that is because we always do things in life, we reach a point and we're satisfied for the moment. Like the question mark, say the question mark, what am I going to do with my life after college? Oh, 2 years I'm going to do Peace Corps. So you've asked the question and then you answer it. So it eventually becomes a sentence because it's going to have an end. But then you ask yourself another question, like, what do I want to do next? If we look at this chart, I'll just use this calendar I used on the earlier chart. It's just the idea of how the line and circle. Go back to the line and circle where I put it. I was saying that you find this line and circle showing up in many places. So if you take the line idea and marry it to the circle idea in the context of days, weeks, months, years, you're always moving forward in time. Like right now we're moving towards 2012, but I always return to January. I always return to February. Each week I'm moving forward in time, but it's always Monday the next week. Always. So it's a cycle and a progression. So that's what I'm saying about the period and the question mark. You're never going to get to a point where you just want to stop with the progression. You get there, you want to start the cycle over again. And I remember somebody said this, and I had never noticed it, but I thought it was interesting. They said, when you're in intermediate school, you're a third grader, you feel lowly. Then you go up to the fifth grade, you're the big man on campus. But then once you go to middle school, you're the lowly sixth grader. And then you get up to eighth grade, and then you're the lowly freshman again. So it's like you're going forward, but you're repeating the same thing. So that kind of idea. So I thought I never had thought of that. I thought it was cool when somebody mentioned that. So this is why the sentence statement alone can't work, because we're always going to want to do something again. All right, so now we're going to talk about how all this plays into going back a little more to the education stuff. So in this chart I have knowledge, objective, versus experience, subjective. So the main point of this chart, and remember you guys can jump in at any time for whatever reason, is this idea I think we have in America that somehow when you go to a school building, that makes your learning more valid than an experiential knowledge. So the idea I think about is, say you have a dry cleaning business passed down through family generations. That's not something you can necessarily go to school. Like you can't be sitting in the classroom learning about how to separate whites and colors. And your dad teaches you how to run a dry cleaning business. He passes it on to you, and then you run it. But that's not accepted in the current educational model because you didn't go through college and get a piece of paper that says this guy knows how to do a dry cleaning business. And I think it is because it's more of a subjective kind of passing down. Like we were just saying, like no one can verify that. How do we know your dad really taught you the right thing? We didn't, test you on a sheet of paper to say that. So I think that's one idea, And then I think also is because the definition of education needs to be redefined. So the first part of redefining education is I think people, when they think of I hate watching the news because people just throw around the word education because it sounds good, it sounds like economy, it sounds like jobs, it sounds like freedom and liberty. It's just one of those buzzwords. But people get really upset if you say something bad about education. Like Ken Roberts is rooted deeply. I think people think education is their religion. Because when you talk about it, if you don't say, yeah, our kids need education, we need to educate them more, people look at you like, do you believe what this guy said? He said we need to destroy it. I will say right here, the current education needs to be destroyed because it's not working. So people will fillet me over an open fire for saying that. But what I'm saying is, first, I think people think in terms of a building. You go to a school, there's brick walls, there's books, that's education. They're not really thinking about what truly is education. And I put here, if you're going to define education, it could be an organic connection of people and experiences. And once again, it goes back to the touchy-feely, tangible. People don't like, no, they got to be in a hard desk with hard number 2 pencils and a hard, they got to be able to feel that. People literally think you have to be uncomfortable to learn. They literally think you cannot be enjoying learning. So I think, the idea that education is a box building where you have to sit inside, similar to how people see church. Like if I were to go to a group of people who go to church and say, I don't go to church on Sundays, they'd be like, oh, you don't go to church? Why not? I was like, oh, well, I wake up on Sundays and me and my neighbors, we get together, we have dinner in the evening, we sing songs together, we talk about each other's lives. That's more of an organic, what a church should be anyway, because it's not you don't go to the sanctuary of God. People have this mentality that
Church home.
yeah, exactly. People think church means a building. It's that's never what a church was supposed to be. So similarly, I think people see education like that. You can't be outside of a building teaching people. You have to be in the building.
Yeah. Our educational system is kind of it's based on the model of a factory, pretty much.
Yeah.
It's you kind of have everything all segmented into different categories. The most important thing about you is when you were born. So it's your date of, it's your, the way we kind of organize things. Yeah, your date of manufacture, exactly. And it's for some reason we think it makes sense to have everything separated off, and group people this way and this way, that's just the easiest, the quickest, how we can make it the most efficient. And
exactly.
We don't actually try and, I think the educational system is geared towards efficiency and not geared towards trying to understand the kids, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's political, because if you ask most teachers, at least, teachers, I don't know, under, not to be ageist, but under pretty, but the more modern, but there are a lot of older teachers too who would agree that they would be saying the same things you're saying, actually, most of them. And I think it's really the politics of the administrators and the whole system and the people who are on top that keep it so screwy and don't allow it to be changed.
Well, I think it's the sort of lack of sense of creativity, because if it's not this, and even if it's not working, we have to do the same thing because this, and I think it's more so that it's oh my gosh, if we just don't have the Department of Education handing down anything and everything's not by the certain books, are they going to learn? Well, they're not really learning anyway, and I think and there's no actual solid data that says charter schools are better than regular schools, because some charter schools are good and some are not. But I just think that the idea of specialty schools and sort of schools outside of the box and being more creative in this public school system where you teach all the kids the same thing no matter who the kid is and what they learn. I think we're just afraid of that being dismantled, and we're afraid to really be creative about what's next. And it might not have to be some huge, big, top-down kind of thing. I think we're sort of afraid of independence in a sense.
I think that's why people discriminate against homeschooling, because you have to be creative in order to keep your children wanting to learn school at home, and you have to go through you have to be attentive to each different child's way of learning in order to teach them. Whereas in the school, you're she said, you're structured to this one way of teaching, and all the different kids don't learn the way just don't learn that way. So
there are choices though, huh? And I'm dealing with my own children, choices, public school, private, or charter, or anything.
Well, I think that in this country, it's the money. If you have money,
If you have money, you can put them in a chain.
everybody else I think that's the large problem. It's not the people with the money usually that aren't being properly educated because they don't like their school system. They can homeschool. They can send their kids to another school. They can send their own kids away to boarding school, charter school. But I think it's usually they don't have options there. Obviously, aren't finishing high schools, don't have the right test scores. Yeah, but there is a measure of choice, but usually in this country, choice has a lot to do with it.
Yeah. This class could go on forever because, like, to me, that fits into the big picture of, like I said about the American dream, because the whole motive that most of us have been ingrained in our brains since we're little is go to school, get a good job so you can get the big house and the car. And so it's like, so our parents are doing that, like they don't have time to individually focus on their children because we've gotten ourselves into debt and having to pay for the stuff that we didn't even really want. Like what Joseph Prince says, people spending money they don't have to buy things they don't really want to impress people who don't care. Like we're all doing things to get stuff that we think other people will praise us for. So while we're doing that, we're at work, you're not spending time with your wife or with your kids, and you could be living in a much smaller house with less things, but much happier with your family, teaching your kids, not having to work as many hours. It's like, because even if you work the 20-hour work week and you could spend 10 hours at home, but people hear that and they're like, well, we don't have time for that. That's crazy. So we're going to talk about that too, time. But something you said too about the creativity in homeschoolers. This guy, one of the kids who I work with at Lighthouse, is a filmmaking nonprofit. He told me about this school, I think it's in Sweden. He said, if the professors don't make the class interesting enough, the kids don't have to attend. And I mean, I think that's brilliant because why would I want to come to a boring class? I mean, honestly.
So the pressure's on the teacher.
Yeah, exactly. They're going to make it creative. So yeah, a lot of stuff you guys were saying. Okay, so kind of ties into some other stuff. So yeah, like this whole idea of organic experience of education. I ask myself, I think it's funny, people say, we're preparing kids for the real world. Really? And why am I sitting in a room with books of two-dimensional animals when there's a zoo downtown? If I'm going to train to be a botanist, why am I not outside looking at real plants and smelling and, so much about the senses, or the other chart, it's sensor. Why aren't we using our senses to learn? But people think education equals box, and then like you guys, it's not enough time. We don't have time to take kids on field trips. We got to sit them in a class and jam their heads full of knowledge. So time is another subject we'll get into later, like you're saying about the efficiency and the idea that there's never enough time. But I just remember, speaking of stories, so here's a good story we're talking about stories. I was in first grade and we were learning how to count money. Okay, so we're sitting at the desk, and we don't have money. We have workbooks where you punch out fake money. It's paper. Why are we not even something as simple as that? Why wouldn't we use real money and count it? Why wouldn't they say, hey, tell your mom you need to bring 3 $1 bills, 4 quarters, and some pennies and count? Why am I holding money that's lightweight? Once again, 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional. And I just remember the teacher, like I had a trouble. I was like, I don't get this. And she was like, oh, come on, Bernard. It's like, I'm in first grade. This is why I'm here, because you're supposed to be teaching me how to count money. She didn't get an attitude with me for not knowing how to count this paper money. But I just think it's interesting that we have the world around us to learn. I mean, where do you think the first people learned from? There was no books that came with the forest. Like somebody had to go out to the forest and pick a flower and be like, oh, all right, let's go learn about this and study it. Like there's got to be some exploration about the creativity.
I just read today, I don't know where it was in the Bible, but it said that God taught how to love. So that's how we know how to love, because God himself taught us how to. So that just went on what you said.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, obviously for us, we understand that concept.
Yeah.
For the nation at large, well, God is going to teach us. All right, whatever, we're out here. But that is another good thing. It's like, who other is better to teach us than the person who made it, who made the creation? But if I was a teacher, I always tell people, if I was a teacher and I was teaching people about money, I would say, okay, kids, tomorrow we're learning about money. So you need to have your parents give you some real money. And then when they show up the next day, I would have partnered with Mrs. Jones and turned her class into a candy shop, toy store. I'm like, okay, kids, let's go to the store. All right, now here's the catch. You can buy whatever you want, but I hope you learned your skills from yesterday because you're going to have to know how to buy stuff. I mean, why not give kids homework assignments like, hey, parents, when you go to the grocery store, let them buy 3 items so they can actually learn the process of money. We're talking about the real world. We're not really preparing kids for the real world. We're sitting them in classrooms all the time. And so, yeah, I think there's value to sat down periods of reading books and doing exercises, but it's always very theoretical and conceptual. But yet we talk about the real world.
It's interesting, too, our whole... I always have this back and forth about my friends. One of them is like, you need to be pushing everybody to college. Clearly, I went to college twice. It's not a bad thing. But I think that 9 times 10, it doesn't really teach you anything. Like, what does it teach you? And I was like, well, I think that we need to be cultivating in children, like, the sense of entrepreneurship. Like, things that they can actually do when they finish. She's like, no, everybody should go to college. And I was like, we have, like, college up here on this mantle, and literally when you graduate from a bachelor, what can you do? You either go out and then you just spend 4 years and probably over $100,000, and you can't actually even do anything. You come out, you gotta go get a job so you can get some skills, you can learn how to do something. When a person who might have their own business or they're in some technical school, they can actually do something. They can actually fix a car, fix a computer, build something. And I think it's interesting that we don't really value those particular skills. And we're like, gotta get education so you can learn how to do nothing. Then you have to pay for another degree that's gonna actually teach you, hopefully, how to do something. But then after you get that degree, you still have to go get experience because you really won't know how to do it because you're in school.
That's funny.
That's true. To go along with that, I'm very biased because I was homeschooled, but like being homeschooled, you only have to be looking at a book for technically 4 hours out of the day. The rest of the time, it's up to your parents to actually like encourage you to apply that in real life. And so you have to be creative and you have to actually think and be in the real world to apply what you learned for those 4 hours. So homeschool is just like you have this, that the learning, and then you have to go and do it.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on a lot of stuff that we're going towards. I think it's funny, like you said, like I remember when I graduated, I looked at all the papers and it was like, must have a bachelor's degree and what? Keyword, experience. It's hilarious that they want experience then.
I'm going to comment on that. I think it depends on what your major is, because if you're like a business major, a lot of universities now, they actually want their students or prefer their students to get some type of internship experience to gain that work experience. So that way, when you do graduate, you can have something on your resume saying, okay, I have these type of skills. Same thing if you're like a science major. They want like internship in a lab or in a hospital or something. So that way, if you do choose to work, instead of continuing on with your education towards professional school or graduate school, whatever, then you'll have that experience.
But most schools like don't provide those internships, and even like my friend just got her PhD in basically like microbiology, like scientific research, and all the jobs that she's applying to are like, we want experience. And she's like, I just spent 8 years getting my PhD. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna kill myself.
I was in business school, and I think it's interesting the amount of time you spend. And I'm not cracking down on it, but I just think that all the time I was in the class, when I was in my finance classes, that I was in my class, they obviously give you real life experiences. But the amount of time that you actually spend in your internship, which may be 1 and 2 summers, so it's 3 months, as opposed to 6 months out of your whole college experience. And I worked all throughout college, but not necessarily business, as opposed to what is 9 months times whatever. I just think that it's kind of skewed, and then you have to spend 4 years. I just think it's a socialization exercise. It's going to be socialization. I don't think it should cost as much.
The hard thing though,
it's not the real world. It's like a little microcosm In the real world, people don't live in dorms.
Right. I think the
cafeterias.
hard thing is that, like, while the real world is really different from, like, what they think they're preparing us for, real bosses look for not only experience, but those degrees. Yeah. You know, like real employers. Yeah. So it's like there's so many different cogs in this crazy wheel that spits us out, that it's like, it's so hard to change for that reason. I mean, I think employers are gradually changing some of, like what you've been talking about with some of the employers that are much more about the creativity, but I think most of them still look for that liberal arts bachelor, you know, and it's like...
It's better to have a liberal arts versus none at all.
Oh, yeah.
Is that true? I mean...
Only to, maybe not in reality, but to employers.
Versus the experience.
Yeah, I think
and we could change that.
No matter how much experience I have, if I'm in my job, like, you're going to get paid a little bit more because I'm going to get paid a little bit more because I have a bachelor's degree, even if it's somebody who may have, a master's degree. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what most things. When you have the master's degree, that's when you get it, because you're going to get paid more and you're going to have more opportunities to progress, as opposed to there might be a ceiling, like, you know, you're probably not going to be the head of the company with just a bachelor, especially this day and age. The master's is the bachelor's, so.
Yeah, oh my God.
Well, even having my bachelor, like, I don't have my master's, and I, like, feel this immense pressure all the time. Like, you're not going to be good enough until you get your master's. I don't know.
I hate that.
It's a rat race.
It is.
But education, is education who you want to go to versus one who doesn't go?
Well, I think it depends on what you want to do.
Education, doesn't know what to do, or just get a job, make money, and for that right.
I think it's like Laura Jean is saying, it's like the people out there are still under that paradigm, so for them, the way they see you is like, oh, he has a degree versus he doesn't have a degree. Yep. Whereas the video we watched last week where Ken was saying, you know, nowadays, you know, students used to believe that if you had a degree, then you were guaranteed a job. Like, our students don't believe that anymore because you're better off having one than not, but it doesn't guarantee
you might not get a job.
You're better off having one than someone who doesn't.
Yeah.
Really, even if that guy is a genius and he's an artist.
Exactly. It's all about look. But
a little bit different in graphic design, though, I have to say.
Yeah,
it depends on the field, because my cousin didn't even finish his bachelor's and got, like, $1 billion graphic design job. He did go back and finish it, but, like...
Yeah, that's more like what you can do, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I do videography, and I don't have a degree in film. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it would be helpful.
We're definitely way more liberal with creative people, because you know that's a lot. Like, if somebody's a really good, awesome interior decorator, and they do bomb jobs, and you can be like, what's your qualification? Hello, you see this room?
Yeah, it's all in the portfolio.
No school,
you know what I mean?
I can do it.
It's like if only we could be more portfolio focused for everything else.
Yeah.
Or photographer. Where are your credentials? Like, look at these pictures. And I think that it even goes towards what we're talking about here. Like, you have to do those things that are added value that nobody else can do.
Yeah.
You can actually show a little bit of what you know, not like, I wrote this great paper, dissertation. Oh, I have to spend whatever, reading your, you know, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously balance, because, like, I think, organic experiences and connections and exploration, but obviously doctors need to have rigorous training and accountability, and architects need to have accountability because we want people to stay alive. But I think there still needs to be that spirit of exploration within that.
Yeah, these have to go together, I think, on this.
Yeah. So yeah, you were talking about entrepreneurship. My friend was telling me about there's some high school, I can't remember what it is, but she was saying that the students graduate having already started a business.
Mm-hmm. I think I've seen this on TV.
Probably in New York City.
I was about to say, this is in New York. So this is where all great things come from.
I believe it.
You're from there?
Yeah. I'm telling you.
And speaking of that, like a lot of stuff you said, Evan. Okay, so another story I saw like a month or so ago. The guy who co-founded or founded PayPal started this new project where he's paying kids who graduate $100,000 to continue research on projects that they've started. So this one kid started studying.
$100,000.
Yeah, he started I don't know. He's researching some old MRI machines that are no longer in use for something. I can't even remember. But then, like I said, I hate watching the news because everything gets to get controversialized. Oh, new controversial story. The founder of PayPal is keeping kids out of college. It's like, no. It's like, yeah. It's like he's some NBA, draft person. How they say, NBA people shouldn't be drafted straight out of high school. It's not like he made them sign a contract saying, you're not allowed to go to college. It's like, no. Like Ebony said, what did they tell you? Purpose of going to school is so you can have a good job. Well, what they want you to do? Go to school. Oh, son, you got a job? No, you need to come back to school. This thing you just told me I need to have a job. When you get 18, you better have a job, son. Okay, PayPal founders gave me $100,000. Oh, you need to go to college. It's like the man is making $100,000. Let's look at the benefits. He's getting paid. He's working with co-founder of PayPal, who I'm sure is going to be a great business connection forever, and be around other entrepreneurs. It's not like he can't go to college after this. You're going to meet people who's like, oh, wow, you work with the guy who did PayPal? Oh, wow. It's put on your resume, but like you're saying, change dies hard. And I think it's partially what, like Ken said, that education is like a religion to people. Like it's very, like he says, very deeply rooted.
Like it's going to save you.
Yeah, and I think fear of change, even though it's not working, even though things are clearly not working, people are afraid to change, they're terrified. And I kind of likened it to a false truth. It's like its own, like we're talking about in the terms of religion. It's like doing things that we've always done. Oh, that's the way we've always done them. That's what people say. That's my little brother. He said teachers say that to him and it drives him crazy. He just graduated from high school. He's going to tech. So like that mantra, whoa, that's the way we've always done it. It's like a counterfeit truth. It's like people are afraid to change it or, we can't mess with that. That's our truth.
I have to, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I also think, as someone who works very closely with the education system and watches it very closely and does consulting even with them, there is tons of change happening. In fact, they're chasing after change a lot. And if you look at the Safe Schools, Healthy Students programs in the schools in our area, actually, they are taking, it's baby steps, very baby steps, because it's this Hankins system that is just this gargantuan mess, But again, it's so political. But what is going on inside is that they are taking time out of class time to create a human environment. And for instance, in the middle schools, it sounds tiny, but it's huge for our Hankins school system. They're taking half an hour a week where they literally have the kids sit and they get to know each other and they learn about emotions and so there is a lot of change happening. There are a lot of people really moving forward and really getting in touch with all these things that you're talking about. So I wouldn't just totally bash school and education because they are trying. It's just they're so strapped down, they're just inhibited because of how massive this system is that is killing everybody. And then of course the people at the top just are so resistant because I don't want to show that my school is unsafe or has social issues, because then my school will get on the unsafe list and then no one will want to come to my school and then they'll kick me out of my principal position and then so I think, there is hope, but I also agree with you. So I don't know, I'm just struggling inside.
Well, I think that there just needs to what we're talking about, there just needs to be a little bit more balance.
Yeah.
Not so much. Just some of both, so you can have, we always talk about well-rounded.
Yep.
A more well-rounded experience. What time was this? Too much yang and not enough yin? I don't remember what time.
Too much yin brain, not enough yang brain.
Yeah, too much yin and not enough yang.
Well, Lord Jean, I'm sort of one of those just continuous, forceful personalities.
I know
There's no stopping.
But you're right. You're totally right. And I think there are a lot of people who agree with you. So it's more just okay, how do we apply these things when we've gotten ourselves in such a big mess?
Yeah, that's why one of my friends, she told me, she was like, yeah, whenever you would say stuff, I would always just scoff at you because it was so theoretical and conceptual. I was like, you're like the sharpshooter, but I'm just like the bomb. I'm just here to land on stuff. Boom, there it is. Figure it out. And then, everybody, I'll let other people deal with the structure. I'm just here to here's the problem, fix it. All right, moving on to the next thing. Next.
We do need people like that.
I like that.
So. Speaking of change, we'll talk more about this idea of integration later, like why we compartmentalize work and education and fun over here. When you do that, you automatically are saying, oh, this is not allowed to be fun because your fun is over here. So there's this great article my friend sent me. It's called The Creativity Crisis. And there's a school, high school, I think. They had a library, and they said there was a lot of noise traffic in the hall that bled into the library. So somebody started a project. It's like, okay, why don't we get the kids involved building some type of sound barrier? So they basically got the kids to build a sound barrier, and they were able to use interdisciplines to make this project happen. So they had to go to Lowe's, so they had to learn about budgeting, they had to learn about the different materials that absorb sound, they had to learn how to design, creativity, they had to learn about the math and construct it. So it was very holistic, and they said the kids went from saying, when are we ever going to use this, to saying, do we have to leave school now? So the idea of when you make things holistic and integrated and fun and creative and actually challenge kids, they want to be at school. It's not kids, like that's what we're talking. Oh yeah, kids are just video games and texting and girls, they're just so distracted. Like no, they're actually really smart, but you're not challenging them.
Because we lump SOLs.
Yeah, SOLs. My goodness, we're not even going to talk about that.
You're not allowed to teach. You have to give them tests all day, every day.
Okay, so what about the students who just flunk? Is that because the teacher isn't challenging them?
Not necessarily. I think everything always has a bigger picture. I mean, there's obviously always going to be some people who just want to do what they want to do. You got to factor in human will. Some people just don't care. I think, too, there's, like Chertone was talking about her son, she took him out of that kind of environment because he was just creative. Like Ken Robinson, the story he talked about the dancer girl who, they were saying, your daughter's something wrong with her. He's like, no, there's a dancer, go enroll her in class. There was another story in the book by Stuart Brown, Play, that I always talk about. There was this one girl in class and she couldn't focus. And so then her mom figured out that once she sat her on this little bouncy ball, like the daughter could focus and she would do her vocabulary words so I think there's another thing, factoring that idea that we're all unique. And, we're moving towards this thing where people are saying like, hey, school isn't always for everybody. Not that they're not smart, but school, the box building definition of education doesn't mean that person can't succeed, but it's just our paradigm that college and degree is the way to go. So there's something wrong with this kid versus wait, he just learns differently. Why don't we adapt to him? So I think there's lots of stuff that can factor in that.
And I might come off as a little biased because I have a mother who's been teaching high school for 18 years, and she's been in the field for a while, and she pretty much knows the educational system in and out. So I often hear her say stories about how kids, they just don't care or they just don't want to listen. And partially it could be because of what she had just said, that they're not, being attended to as far as who they are individually and the way they learn. And the other half could be okay, well, maybe they're just distracted or they just really don't care.
Yeah.
So,
I think that even the good teachers don't even have the freedom to do what they want to do. So think about if you're young, you're energetic, you're excited about teaching, and you really have to teach that SOL. How excited you're even going to be as a teacher. You just have this information, and you got to get it into their brain or your job.
And then the good people leave the field because they get so angry.
It's not like you're getting paid major bucks to do other people's kids that are crazy half the time. Crazy administrators. And plus you're stuck in the middle.
That's exactly what happened to my history teacher, actually. He was really creative. He loved teaching history. I hated it. But he was a really good teacher. He stood on the table countless times just to make a point, jumped across people's desks to get their attention. But he quit because he couldn't, they wouldn't allow him to do all this stuff, and they weren't, on the same track as his mind was because he was so creative in that.
Yeah, I think something else, I just did this video last week of a private school, Christian school, and one of the people we interviewed was making the point that, she loved that it was a Christian school because, if someone saw her son acting up, it wouldn't just be like, get in place, boy. She would actually like ask him, we'll try to get to the root of like, well, why are you sad, or why are you acting like? So I think that too, like bringing the Christian perspective that obviously most of the world, education system is not like dealing with the whole human being and not just trying to corral people. Sit down. That's what school is now. So you sit. Go. I'm trying to teach. It's like, well, what's going on with this person? And why is he acting up? Maybe it's because something else he cares more about than your math problem on the board right now. So I think we completely forget about the human side and why people might act out. So it's like we have to have a much broader picture of everything in order to even start to think about people acting out and flunking and But I thought it was interesting in this design. He talks about the school Chad and how I think he said most of the kids were black kids. But it was the only school without metal detectors. You have to go back and reread because I don't know if I'm being completely accurate. But just this idea that you find kids who are supposed to be the at-risk black kids, and you show them design and they come alive, and the guy was like, yeah, I always would draw in class. Makes me think of an architecture class I took in high school. There was this one kid, he was a pothead. But I just remember like me being, A and B student, wanted to be an architect. It would take me forever to do the projects. This kid just had a natural drawing talent. He would be finished before everybody else in the class, always get an A. Like I was getting C's and C pluses, never used to getting that kind of stuff. He would just be done. So going back to that experience idea, it's not always about school. Like some people just have a natural gift and they just need to be pushed and challenged. And also, it's not about the school, the training, the degree, because this kid obviously had a gift that who was going to be a professional architect going to UVA, he was just getting stuff done in half the time. And kind of related to this too, like I don't know if you guys ever seen that movie with Hillary Swank, Freedom Riders. I guess it's based on a true story. I mean, just that alone makes me go, wow, this woman went into a school of at-risk black kids and she started teaching about the Holocaust, and she challenged them. She looked at the kids and said, okay, I don't see you like everybody else sees you. I see you as people who want to do something, but nobody's asking you. They're telling you. Going back to the period question, they're being told, this is who you are, 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 versus like, hey, who are you? You guys know about this? Oh, you guys want to explain? Because I think, race can fit into this too. I think there's this mentality, there's certain kind of people who want to learn and certain people who don't. You can start to look at certain population groups and saying like, oh, those guys, they just don't want to learn. Like, not looking at every human being and saying we all have the desire to be creative, autonomous, free. I mean, I even had to learn that working with some of the Lighthouse kids, because I let that get into my brain where I would go into certain neighborhoods and be like, well, we got to do certain kind of projects with these kids, and then I was like, why don't we just all be creative? Like, I finally was just like, why don't I just be creative? And the kids just gravitated towards it. Like, yeah, we like making beats and making. And it's like, oh, why not just do that to begin with? It was.
I have to say, I have found some of the most amazing kids in juvie. Like, I've been in there this summer a ton, and like, they're some of the most brilliant. They're all young guys, and like, yeah. I'm like, I could go into a school and be amazed to find someone like you, and here I am at juvie where you would think, whatever, people who don't know what they're doing or whatever, and they're some of the smartest, most amazing, thoughtful, like, people, and I'm like, I just feel like, it's so easy to immediately assume, like, oh, well, you're here, so you must.
They're frustrated geniuses.
Some of them are, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it made me think of a lot of thoughts. First, the whole class, like I said, the class is called The Image of the Creator. So I hope that we got to this point where we see that everybody is a lowercase c creator, even at their base. And that's what connects us. So that's that universality that I can look at you and be like, okay, I don't have anything else in common, but we both have this desire to be creative in some capacity. So starting to, break down walls with that aspect, like, hey, he likes to be creative, I like to be creative, I like curiosity. Also, this is something I was going to kind of mention in another section, but the idea of like creativity when you're put into a limit, like it comes out. So I'm always amazed when I watch these prison shows. It's like, yeah, I had a shank and I made it out of a toothbrush and a piece of a sock, and you're like, what? Like these people, like, like the ingenuity that has to come out when you're forced. Like these prison people are brilliant. Like we don't think they are, but they just come up with the stuff that you would never think of with the least amount of materials. And but yet we think, oh yeah, stupid prisoners. Like okay, it's like one of my favorite movies is Escape from Alcatraz. So I just remember the beginning scenes. They have the guy who's the ringleader of leading escape. They show his file and it says IQ like 160 or something, and he's the one who helped come up with all the plans and the devices to break them out. So just that idea that we look at people and we don't see degree, we don't see college educated, and we think they're stupid, and really they can be very brilliant. And I think that also ties into like a lot of hip hop. People have this mentality that hip hop and rap is like stupid. What are they talking about? But if you were to really sit down and listen to how people weave words together,
That's amazing.
You're like, oh, he actually has to know what those words mean in order to make them. So I think there's just there's a lot of stuff going on with the racial element, but that's part of it. But I just think it's very interesting how we look at people. Racial element, class element. That's one of the things I put on here. I said, the idea of passing down the dry cleaning business. Do we look at those people the same way as somebody who's got a Fortune 500 passed down from their father? Like, do we say, oh, that was just passed down to you, internal knowledge, like you didn't have to go to school? Like, do we look differently at that because these people are rich and these people aren't rich? Even though we're talking about the same thing of people not going to an education institution to get that knowledge. Other thing I put, So Stuart Brown in his book, he was saying, some parents, they were making comments like, oh, teachers are trying to use drama and art to make kids learn. They might be having fun. And he's like, what does it matter if they're learning at the same time? And he said, actually, it's probably better that they learn and have fun because when you have, it's like your body, when it has a pleasurable experience, it creates a memory. And it attaches that pleasurable experience to the memory. So every time you have that memory, you want to have that pleasurable experience brought up again. So you're going to have to think of that memory to make it happen. And so if your kid can be like, oh yeah, this is the time me and Mr. Smith dressed up like, pirates to talk about history and ships and trading on the seas, like why does it matter?
They're actually doing that in Albemarle High School. They have a class now that they learn history through watching movies. That's the whole class. You watch movies all the time just to learn history. My brother told me that the other day. I'm like, wow. That's the reason why he loves history, because of the movies they make it from it. So that's how he learns it. So even though most of it's not true, I know I was going to say, I hope they get more than just the movie. He learns a lot of it, and then if he knows it's not true, he goes and tries to find the truth that they took it from.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have to stay with the movies. Like, hey kids, this is a starting point. But I always remember I loved video day. It was like something not boring. We're watching TV.
Did anybody ever Quest? Quest was something I did only in elementary school.
Maybe.
It was the best class I ever took. And basically we just did random creative stuff. Like we had the World Peace Game, which was really fun, where you got to be presidents and Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense of different countries. And we had stuff I don't know if you guys ever did the marble thing where you tried to make the marble go as slow as possible through some system. You got to create some sort of maze or whatever way you wanted to try to do it. You could use dough to rise, you could use ice or whatever, anything. And then we had something we do every day, which was called sound drawing, where you just close your eyes, you listen to a song, and just draw whatever you saw. And we did a lot of stuff like that. We just do different writing assignments, different projects, but the whole point of it was just to do fun, interesting stuff that was just more creative and more out there, and not to the book. You know what I mean? It was just kind of whatever our teacher wanted us to do. Our teacher kind of just created it himself, and that was the best thing ever. That was probably the best class I ever had. It was my favorite class ever, and I think that was also when I was just the most interested in what I was doing and the most productive as a student. I don't know like what happened to that. I don't know if they still have it. But I feel like that's something that should like continue. It was just elementary school and it just stopped after that. And like
I think they have it. I think I hear my daughter say that.
Yeah, that's good. But I think that's something they should
Then
do.
you grow up and you have to be serious.
Yeah.
Boring.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that. Man, I got a whole...
Yeah, that was one of the best parts of it.
Yeah, it's too bad, like, a lot of this stuff is always, like, after... Like, I had a group I was in called Chrome, which is, like, Cooperative Hampton Roads Organization of Minority Engineers. We would do stuff like, okay, we're going to drop an egg from 10 feet and you only have 2 pieces of paper to make a cradle. You know, making you think outside the box and do something fun, but you're learning at the same time. It's like, why is that clubs after school? Why don't we have that during school? I love the Walt Disney. Walt Disney has a bunch of great quotes. Once for whatever reason, I found a bunch of his quotes, but one of them, it says, I'd much rather entertained hoping that I've educated than educate hoping that I've entertained. And I think that's such a really telling quote, because if you're entertained by something, like Brown was just saying, you're going to walk away with something thinking about that. But if, you know, we've all seen the bad plays. It's like, hey kids, we're going to teach you how to rap. 1 times 1, 6 times. It's like, get this out of my face. Like, if you got to hide it behind something cool, I already know it's not cool. You can tell when people are trying really hard to act, you know, plays about, well, isn't math great? Oh, math is wonderful. And you're just sitting there like, who wrote this? And why do I want to have somebody? I'm supposed to be watching a play, and I got somebody telling me about math. I'm trying to go through this chart really quick. So non-intellectual jobs are seen as inferior because they didn't go through the building of education. There's this great book I saw, it's called The Intelligence of the American Worker, and I just flipped through it. But the title headings were like plumber, waitress. I have a friend who's a mover, and I think it was just telling about, you know, we think these people are dumb, you know, waitress, oh, they only make such and such an hour. It's like, these people have to add numbers in their head. These plumbers have to figure out how to get the pipes configured. Like, they have to solve problems. And so my friend was saying, you know, he's a mover. He go to people's houses. He's already mentally rotating something in his mind. Like, yeah, we got to do that, and out the door. Like, these people may be PhD and rich, but they can't move the furniture. Like, they need him in that moment. In that moment, experience trumps knowledge in PhD. It's funny, just last week, the video that I was shooting with this guy, he's like a millionaire business guy. Like, I'll sit in his conferences and he's telling me how to market and, you know, get your business growing, get your video business growing. But then I had to help him because he didn't know anything about video. I just went to his office and I was like, okay, you need this cord, you need that video, give me that disc. And he just like he has no idea how to use a computer. So in that moment, my experience was much more valuable to him than anything he knew how to do. I think this is part of a theory. Like, I think the idea of, you know, business being passed down to the family could be out of this mentality of, you know, if I go to school and I do it, I've done it on my own. Like, I didn't have family help. I'm a self-starter. So I think maybe that's part of why the idea of like passing down a dry cleaning business or something that didn't come from school, people don't take as serious because you can't say I did that on my own. So then linked in with our topics on autonomy, I said, you know, that's autonomy gone too far to the point where you think, oh, I never need help of anybody. So, you know, you could literally say, you know, I don't need anyone. Look, okay, on one end of the spectrum, you say, look, I didn't need anyone. And you could say that same phrase in two different ways, like, I didn't need anyone. Or you could be like, look, I didn't need anyone, I did it on my own. Like, there's two different motivations. One is very, like, responsibility and finding your own potential and growth, and the other one is the falsehood that you didn't ever have help. Like, we all had help at some point. So I think people like the idea of going to school because they can say, oh yeah, I went through college and I got the degree and I got the job. Versus where there's much more family, you know, centered model of, oh, well, family helps you and they pass down to business.
It's so ironic.
Yeah.
Because how do you think you got through college?
Yeah. There's all these, the web of stuff that we think is ridiculous. So I say you always need help, and you are not here, like you're saying, where you are today because of yourself. And this will relate into something we'll get into more about. Like Chaton was saying, you know, women leaders are usually more collaborative. So I think the spirit of the feminine in us all, we sort of crush that, the collaborative idea. We're more the male spirit of autonomy all the way to the spectrum. It's like, I never need anyone. So we got to find that balance of autonomy and needing help. All right, so taking the line and the circle idea, applying it to life. So this is kind of transitioning out of education into broader life. So you got lifeline versus circle of life. So like I said, people like the A to B linear because it's predefined and it's simple, it's safe, and it's short. People don't like the circle or curvilinear method of life because it's messy, it's long, it's risky. So you're going to get from A to B, but you're going to have, you know, the unknown is undefined versus the predefined. On the linear side, it's more about task, getting things done. On the circle side, it's more about experience-oriented, enjoying the process. So to kind of tie all that stuff together, I read this article where there's this husband and wife. They wrote it together to kind of give insights of the opposite sex to other married couples. So I thought it was interesting. I always took this image with me because the lady said, okay, ladies, you know, I'll try to give you insight into my husband. You know, he's male, so he's more task-oriented. So if we go on vacation, he wants to leave and get to the destination. He has a goal, very clear. She said, me on the other end, like, I want to get to the destination too, but I don't mind stopping at the outlets and boutiques and sites because I want to enjoy the trip as well. So I think we're currently living in this thing where we're getting to destinations, but we're not enjoying the trips. Because you hear people saying, like, I'm just trying to get through this. I'm just trying to get over the hump week. I'm just trying to get to Friday. Like, everything is about getting over, getting through, getting it done. Like, nobody's abiding in the moment, enjoying the experience.
Care about A and B and not what's between A and B.
Exactly. It's like getting to A and B, getting from A to B is more important than, like you're saying, what happens. And my friend, she had this idea. She said, you know, she was talking with somebody and they're saying, like, you know, your relationship with God is sort of like a mountain. If you get to the top, but you don't enjoy Him along the way, to Him it's like, what was the point? You know, it's more about the relationship that happened. Like, the relationship is the actual journey. You know, going, like I was talking about a couple weeks ago, you can go to Hawaii all you want, but if you're not in love with the person you're going with, you might as well be in hell. So yeah, I just think it's interesting that, like, you have people, you got real creative. They're trying to get to Friday. They're trying to get from Monday. Yeah, this was inspired by you. So they're trying to get from Monday to Friday. You'll see. So, like, you take a verse like, this is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. I think it's interesting that, you know, God created the day. Like, we don't think of the day as an invention, but He's like, I made that thing called the day. And you wake up and say, oh, it's Monday, it sucks. He's like, I made a day for people to rejoice and be happy, not for it to suck. So most people are trying to get through Monday, because Friday is the only good day, apparently. I don't know why. There's something special about Friday. It's because people are bored all week. 5 days out of the week, and it's like, oh, I'm going to have all my fun on Friday and Saturday. Well, why don't you have your fun during the week, too? Integrated. We'll talk about that. All right. So we're winding down, but I'm glad this is at least as far as I wanted to get. So, why people enjoy, well, I said earlier about the unpredictability. We fear this, even though we also want this. So the reason that people fear this is because, as we're talking about the idea of co-creating, if you believe the person you're on this adventure with is mean, then you're going to fear the adventure. But if you believe the person you're on the adventure with is loving, you're going to enjoy the adventure. So on this side I have adventure fear, the other side adventure love. So you have husband, wife. Husband's got the wife blindfolded, says, don't peek, honey. So So this is her image of the husband. Maniacal, sinister, evil, twisted. So kind of going back to this other chart where I said, even if the person over here is perfect, if you have a lens here that always sees bad, no matter what they say, it's going to translate to bad. So a similar thing, she kind of interprets these images through how she sees him. So she's looking at maniacal husband like, oh, it's going to be murder, death, gas, poisonous, bombs, spiders, guns. That's what she thinks the husband is going to do to her because this is her image of her husband. This other wife, on the other hand, is blindfolded. She can't see. Same husband saying don't peek. But she sees the husband as in love with her, so she's thinking, oh, he's got me birthday cakes, love, money, jewelry, a puppy, fragrances. So once again, going back to the motivation of fear and love. If you think that the person we're on this journey with is this, you're going to fear the unpredictable. Oh, he's got me blindfolded. Oh, what's he going to do to me? If you think the person that you're in love with is love, you're going to let go and enjoy the ride. Perfect love casts out fear. And like I said on this chart, if the person over here is perfect, but your lens says he's not, then it's not the person's fault. It's you're getting your lens wiped off or in focus or in the right position to see the perfect person. And then that other talk we had about, the mind, because once the cycle starts, once you get into your head, oh, the person who I'm on this journey with is in love with me, then it will set your emotions at ease. So all the stuff relates. So, the other reason that people like the linear predictable is because it eliminates failure. It's like if I have the equation, I plug in the numbers they gave me, I'm going to succeed. So again, that kind of relates to the heart that you think the person you're on this journey with has. So if we look at this chart, if you look at this box, this is kind of life. This box is life. And all of the dotted dash, that's sort of the unknown boundaries beyond life. All of the straight lines just at the edge are the kind of the safety zones. So I think if we think that we're somehow going to fail, it's because we think that God has not set up the playing field to be even or equal to our abilities. We think God is maniacal and it's like, oh, he's giving me all these talents and gifts and desires and dreams, but he's going to make it so I can't do it. It's going to be too hard. So I think if we don't see God as creating a fair playing field where he's like, look, yeah, you don't want to go too far out there because you're going to fall off. I'm setting up the safety, the guidelines for you to be safe. Stay in here and play. You can't break it. There's nothing outside of him. There's nothing too big outside of him, so you don't have to worry about that. So realizing that the person we're with has made a fair playing ground, I think will help set some of those fears at ease, that I can go out, I can explore, I can go to the unknown, to the edge of it and figure it out, because he's not going to let me fall off the edge. Like, he's set up the boundaries. If I just stay in his guidelines and his rules and what is good and what is not good, then I don't have to fear what I'm going to do in life. I'm not going to mess it up. I'm not going to go too far where he's like, all right, you're out, game over, off my playing field. What was the other? So some of this was inspired by you, Ebony, because you were asking about kind of like, I got these things I want to do. I want it laid out in front of me. I just wanted, and I think I was thinking about this, like I think that mentality kind of like, finds its way through different spheres of life. So this idea that people want everything laid out for them, because once I know it, then I'm safe. I can just do it. I think you see that same type of mentality. As people think that with money. They're like, oh, once I win the lottery, I don't have to worry about anything ever again. It's like they just want to lay up all this money because then I'll never have to trust anyone again. I mean, that's great. but I don't think that's the way we were created to live in trust and relationship. Like, he wants us to trust him. That's why the manna only came, once a day. It's like, don't gather up more than you can take, because I want to provide more tomorrow. So I think seeing it through that context that, God wants us to trust him, because it's supposed to be an adventure. Like, he wants to blow your mind. Like, how is he going to do it this time? So that'll take us to this part of the chart, which is, going back to the idea of mystery, yin yang. I'm not going to pick it up, what it looks like. Like I said, people fear mystery, but really we like mystery too, if we trust the person giving it to us. So here on the bottom, I have this cycle of going from the known to the unknown, back to the known again. So you have, a guy putting a gift in a box, wrapping it up. So he has knowledge of the gift. He knows what it is, but the box, the wrapping, it conceals, veils the gift. So now it's unknown. And then the person who opens the gift makes it known again. So it's like, why do we go through this process of hiding things? You could just go up to the person and say, here's a gift. Like, it takes away the fun and the mystery and the curiosity of being like, shaking the box, like, what's in it? Like, you're a little kid at Christmas, you're picking up the box, like, what's in here? Your mom's like, put it down, you figure it out. Like, if all your gifts were just sitting under the tree, you would be like, I saw that all week. So we like the hiding of the in-between. So I think if you take that and apply it to life, if we start here at home at the beginning, the guy's kind of on the edge, his foot, he's like, I don't know about this, but he wants to get to the other side. Really your bridge that gets you across is made up of question marks. Like, there's no bridge waiting for you. Like, you kind of have to create the bridge as you go, like that Indiana Jones.
I was going to say, wasn't that Indiana Jones?
Yeah, like once you step out, then the bridge, And it's kind of, I think it deals with free will. God's like, what are you going to do? You got to make a choice. I can't direct your choices. It's free will. But yeah, people are afraid because, like, what if I fall in this valley and then I die? But I think we have to go back to this. Do we trust that the person we're traveling with truly loves us and is going to do we think he's going to let us die? If we do, then yeah. If you believe the person you're blindfolded by, I don't blame anybody for feeling like this if you think the person you're with feels like that. That's a natural emotion. But yeah, we like the in-between. We like the not knowing. We like to see the beginning and the end and make up the middle as we go. And this person down here, they've gotten a gift before. There's not going to be anything in the box that's like, oh my goodness, I've never seen anything like this in all of existence. Like, it's going to be a watch, it's going to be a tie, it's going to be something that they've seen before. So the only thing that makes it interesting is the wrapping of it, not knowing what it is before they get it. Same thing, I have over here this cartoon. Yes, same concept, different context. People dating. So the girl's like, are we going to get married? He's like, yeah, someday. So that's the known part. Some random person came up to you and talked about getting married, you'd be terrified. That's why the balance of knowledge and emotion are important. You can't just have random events. So then here in the middle, they're sitting on the couch. She's thinking to herself, when is he going to ask me already? And he's sitting next to her thinking in his head, oh, she has no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. So then, he blindfolds her, more mystery, leads her to the place where he's going to pop the question. And she's like, don't ever do that to me again and make me wait. Surprise. So that waiting, it was a little bit of frustrating, a little bit of like, when is he going to do it? But what if he would have just been like, when are we going to get married? Yeah, here's a ring. There's no excitement, there's no surprise, there's no mystery, there's no pursuing of her. It's a little bit of waiting, but if she knew that this guy was in love with her, like if she had full knowledge of that, she wouldn't even doubt it for a second. She might get a little anxious, a little antsy. It's like, okay, it's been a little while now, but ultimately knowing that he's in love with her makes her rest at ease, like, okay, he's going to do it. So I guess I'll end on this, which is just all connected. So on this roller coaster ride of life, the ride of life. Buy your ticket now. You're in the roller coaster car of adventure and risk. So the thing that I like about this is, going back to the charts of the brain and the heart, how they're communicating with one another. So to kind of personify information and emotion, and information deals with the known and emotion deals with the unknown. So imagine on this roller coaster ride, you have information, the more masculine, holding emotion, the more feminine. So I remember hearing somebody say once in a sermon, they're saying, the thing about love is it's kind of like a roller coaster. It's this perfect balance of terror and excitement. You feel like, oh my goodness, I'm going to come flying out of this car. But all the while, you know that the lap bar is holding you in. So the two of those are very important, because if you thought the lap bar was going to come out, you'd be terrified. You wouldn't even get on the roller coaster. But a roller coaster ride where you're strapped in so tight that you can't enjoy the sensation is boring. So I think that your emotions, which are saying, we're going to die, they like that. They like that to the point where the information comes in and says, okay, we're not going to die, the lap bar has got us. Like, you got to have that little unknown of feeling like you're going to come out of the car or it won't be fun. But without the information is looking down at the lap bar saying, nah, I got the lap bar in my head, we're safe. Without that, it's going to be not a fun ride, but a terrifying ride. So I think knowing the knowledge, information in your head that the person you're on this roller coaster ride of life with has you secure and is not going to let you come flying out of the seat can set your heart at ease to say, okay, I can just enjoy the ride. I can let go. I don't have to plan every moment. I don't have to plan every day. I don't have to know every step. I can just enjoy this adventure, because that's part of what an adventure is not knowing and just going with the flow. So that will be the end for tonight.